Okay, welcome. Today I wanted to offer some reflections about fear and boarding school. And I want to talk a little bit about Bear Grylls. I wanted to talk a little bit about Nick Duffel's work and some of my own experiences of boarding school and fear. Enjoy. So today I wanted to just offer some reflections. I wanted to talk a bit about Bear Grylls from his biography Mud, Sweat and Tears, about what his experience was and talking about fear. I wanted to talk a little bit about Nick Duffel and Thurston Bassett's book, and then there's also Ant Middleton's The Fear Bubble as well. And so over the last couple of days I've been feeling a bit of fear. We're off for the documentary. I'm going down to the director and the editor to work on the documentary Boarding on Insanity. So we spent the last few years preparing, filming, and now we're piecing things together, seeing what's missing. And I've been feeling some fear. And I was reading some of Ant Middleton's book. I read it a few years ago, and he gives this exercise called the fear bubble. And he talks about how when he first went into the military, he would often be in a fear space for, a long period of time. All the time he was at home, he'd be frightened. And he talks about a practice in there about how we can actually learn that we're safe. So at home, I'm safe. And then it's actually to see there's different moments where we step into a bubble, a fear bubble. It might be you've got an interview tomorrow. As soon as you step into that space, you're allowed to feel that fear. But before that, we learn to turn the nervous system off. What I've noticed is that for ex-boarders, with my clients and with myself, I'm much better now, but I still can get triggered. At boarding school, I felt I was in fear. I was hypervigilant a lot of the time. As you've heard the stories, those who've listened to my channel before, is until the age of 16, I didn't have a door on my own private space. It was open dorms from 11 through till 16. And what that meant is, although I was good at sport, I was hypervigilant, worried that people might bully me, might upset something. And I realized it was in the last few years realizing that most of my time at school was in fear. Although, I was good at sport, I was still watching for the person coming up beneath me, or, maybe I'd make a mistake or say the wrong thing. So there was this feeling of fear. And, some of the beliefs I took on at school was fear of failure. I'm really frightened of failing. Fear of being ostracized. Fear of getting the other side, fear of getting close to others, being vulnerable. Fear of making mistakes. And, this feeling of I can't make mistakes. So really that tightness. So let me read Bear Grylls' biography, Mud, Sweat and Tears. And in it, he talks about how when he goes off to boarding school, he says, it was really hard. He says, coping with fear was the big one. The fear of being left and the fear of being bullied, both of which were very real. What I learnt was that I couldn't manage either of those things very well on my own. It wasn't anything to do with the school itself. In fact, he talks about teachers, but sadly, it didn't make surviving it much easier. And then he goes on to say at the bottom, he says, I meet a lot of folk nowadays who say how great boarding school is as a way of toughening kids up. That feels a bit back to front to me. I was much tougher before school. I had learnt to love the outdoors and to understand the wild and how to push myself. When I hit school, suddenly all I felt was fear. Fear forces you to look tough on the outside, but makes you weak on the inside. So that's really interesting, that Bear Gryll's considered one of the toughest men. SAS, military. He's saying, when I hit boarding school, suddenly all I felt was fear. And then Nick Duffel in his book here, Trauma, Abandonment and Privilege, page 45. Boarding school places demands on children to grow up very quickly and become premature adults. The glossy brochures that advertise the schools promote self-reliance and the value of community. Dependence and childishness are therefore seen as obstacles to be overcome. Children have to somehow survive in what is essentially an alien environment, conceived by adults who are not their caretakers. Yeah, and he says basically, losing the security and comfort of their homes, boarders now have to live in an institution without parents, siblings, toys and pets, constantly surrounded by their peers who are scared and missing their families but not allowed to show their feelings. The institutions are beset with rules which are easily infringed but said to be good for the children. Yeah. As we know from the novel Lord of the Flies by William Golding, whose father was a schoolmaster in the town of Marlborough, children growing up without families can be very cruel to each other. Boarders have to be on high alert to protect themselves. They will be on the lookout for any signs of vulnerability to scapegoat and bully in others. The need for hypervigilance is ever present, since boarding schools are 24/7 institutions. In the absence of grown-up loving protectors and a place to be truly safe, boarding children must hide their internal anxiety and develop self-protection in order to have a chance of surviving. So it's just talking basically about fear, the hypervigilant. Yeah. So, and it kind of resonates with my own story of school. It's like, yeah, I was just in fear, and I took that fear into my adult life. Not being able to relax, not being able to stop. Nick Duffel in Wounded Leaders, he talks about this idea of the symptoms, and he says, workaholism, inability to relax, inauthenticity, isolation, a sense of failure. So these are the things that I carried, and many ex-boarders carry forth. So just this fear. Trying to think what other things I was going to mention about fear. So I think, one of the things with fear is it's unconscious. So how we start to heal that is we start to bring mindfulness that, I'm feeling a lot of fear. My body's tense. I'm frightened like I've been feeling. And how that can come across is I can be a bit short. I can be a little bit, I rush around a bit if I'm in fear. So the first step is to acknowledge, I've gone into fear. And we can use the Ant Middleton's The Fear Bubble, which is essentially just saying, and I use this with clients a lot, is when we've gone into fear, just look left and right. And this comes partly from Bessel van der Kolk's work, talking about when our brain goes into freeze, we just do some form of movement, just check, left and right, am I still at school, or is there a lion around, am I safe, just to let your nerves, so that's the first thing, to really notice that, acknowledge. And then if there is an event which is happening, say tomorrow, you've got an interview, is to see, that's the bubble. Before you step into that bubble, then it's okay to feel the fear, because that's helping you to prepare. And that's kind of reframing it from the negative, this is a bad thing, to, this is positive, this is helping me to prepare. And then he says you go in, you feel that fear, helps you get the interview done. And the important part then, especially for ex-boarders, is to step out of the bubble once you've done the interview. Again, checking if you're safe, left and right. Everything's okay. Because I feel, as Nick's saying there, is there's an underlying current of just hypervigilance all the time. We're just unconscious. We can't stop working. We've got to be doing something. And it's like that low level anxiety, that low level fear. And so what we're doing here is just noticing, there are instances, okay, I'm going off doing this film, we've got to drive. Okay, that would be a fear bubble. I need to step into that. And then he says you've got to burst them quite quickly. Then you step out again. And it might be a minute, a couple of minutes. He talks in his book about an exam. Rather than being in that fear bubble for the 2 hours, you step in for the first question, fear bubble. Then you finish the first question, you step out again. You breathe, then you step in. And so you're not locked in that all the time. And I've noticed this really helped me because of the fear I've been carrying. So, just some ideas there. I hope this is helpful. Any questions, please do let me know. And like I said, the film, we've done the first edit, so we're just getting the pieces together. So I imagine in the next 6 months we will have a finished product. So that's really, really exciting. Been listening to Gabor Mate speak, talking about boarding school, and it's like, wow, really insightful. He talks about the abandonment. We're essentially abandoned, which is what Nick Joy talk about. So thank you so much for your time, and have a good week. Bye for now.